Hello, my name's Emma, and I'm going to read you a bedtime story. This book is A Bad Case of Stripes by David Shannon. Camellia Cream loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camellia was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was her first day of school, and she didn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Her mother ran into the room and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camellia was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Miss Cream felt Camelia's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camellia answered. "But just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camellia was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to see Camellia. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, short of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camellia told him. "I am fine." "Well, then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Miss Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's just ointment that should keep her clear of those stripes up in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camellia. They called her Camellia Crayon, the Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camellia turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" and a pattern of squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colors, and poor Camellia was changing faster than you can change colors on a TV. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Miss Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camellia home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes may be contagious." Camellia was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room as her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camellia. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I better bring in the specialist. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with four people in long, white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Drop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialist went to work on Camellia. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Grop. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not the pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialists. They handed her a bottle filled with different colorful pills. Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Drop. Then they filled out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. That night, Camellia took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicolored pill with a face on it. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Miss Green called. But this time, instead of the specialist, he brought the experts. Dr. Gord and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camellia was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down a lot of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Gord finally spoke. It might be a virus, he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camellia. Or possibly some form of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or it could be a fungus, added Dr. Gord. Instantly, Camellia was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camellia, then looked at each other. We need to go over these numbers back again at the lab, Dr. Gord explained. We'll call you when we know something, but the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camellia. Reporters from every channel were outside of her house telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon, a huge crowd was camped out on the front lawn. The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from physiologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionists, physics. An old medicine man, a guru, was even a veteran. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camelia's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and had a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camellia. Close your eyes, she said. Breathe deeply and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, Camellia groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Miss Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse, she began to sob. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it. There stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. She went into Camelia's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake on her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Miss Cream. Oh my, no, replied the kind old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'll bet you'd like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camellia. Camellia wanted a big, heaping plateful of lima beans more than just about anything, but she still was afraid to admit it. Yuck, she said. No one likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, the woman said sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camellia watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been through. She finally couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camelia's